All right.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Quality in Action webinar. I know I have it set so that you can see who's attending, and you might see that we've got about 10 people on the webinar right now. I think there will be more people joining, but I just want to get started on time so we can see as much of this as possible. I'm going to pop ahead here. This is me with my new baby, Will. I'm April Reardon, the Director of Training and Community Partnerships. I'll be your tour guide today. I'm taking the idea of the quality mentoring assessment path and going on a tour of it pretty literally. So I'll be the tour guide. I have been a part of developing this tool, the Quality Mentoring Assessment Path, or QMAP as we've been referring to it. Been with this from the beginning, but interestingly enough, because Will have had a 3-month break from it. So it's a new perspective to come back and be looking at it as a almost finished product and getting refamiliarized with it. I think a lot of people who are participating in the webinar today have participated in our research in action webinars in the past, which I have led along with researchers from around the country, and this Quality in Action series is a natural progression from that, and I think you'll see that as we walk through that we'll be raising some of those same questions about what is quality, what are evidence-based practices. And I do hope to add, maybe we can add in the researchers again as we go down the road. But for today and I think that at least the next webinar, to continue this tour with some mentoring professionals, with the practitioners and the people who are using the tool, will be really helpful. And we'll introduce them momentarily. I'm going to show you what we are going to do today. So some introductions, we'll do some quick logistics. I'm going to do a really brief overview of the QMAP because in looking at the list of people who are participating, I think everyone is kind of familiar with what's going on, or you participated in the last webinar. If you didn't participate the last time, we will have a chance. This is really interactive and you can ask questions. If something doesn't make sense, a lot of this information is available online at our website. And I'll cover some more of that in the logistics, but I'm not going to go through the whole history of where the QMAP comes from, but we'll get a quick overview, because what we really want to get to is this recruitment and screening sections of the QMAP. So it's just a portion of the tool, and looking at how the tool helps programs assess where they're at with their recruitment policies or recruitment practices and their screening practices. And what we'll do is compare it to the Elements of Effective Practice, the new 3rd edition with the research-based standards. And we will look at how our two brave program representatives have answered these questions, or how they're planning to answer them. And I think that will trigger some discussion and conversation. And finally, if you are wondering how to participate in the QMAP, you will have that information right at the end. So some of the logistics, there's lovely Lindsay there. I had listened into a webinar recently with Oregon Mentors, which is the mentoring partnership, our counterpart in Oregon, and have decided I have to add photos of people who are talking. Since we're talking about best practices for mentoring, we should do best practices for PowerPoints and webinars. So here is Lindsay. She's the person who will be managing questions. So we have a couple of options. We want you to be able to, you can raise your hand, and people don't do this nearly enough, but if you raise your hand, we will unmute you so that you can just ask your question. But I know that some people are just listening and not necessarily on the phone or don't have a microphone, so there's also the option of just typing your questions in and submitting them to us. Then sometimes we have questions that are just something that we can respond directly to you about, but if it's a question that applies to the whole webinar, we'll read the question aloud to all the participants and respond that way. When you are unmuted, just please monitor your own background noise, and that's another thing that Lindsay kind of keeps track of, is if we're hearing some background noise or some sort of feedback or things like that, she may mute you if you were unmuted, or send you a message just to be checking in on that. Other logistical pieces, just that typically with the research in action, we've had a PowerPoint, the slides available in advance, and this particular webinar it's not really slide heavy. We're going to really be looking at the tool and jumping to other people's screens and things, but I will have a link to these slides if you want them later, but also just know that they're, if you want to look at all the QMAP items, there's a PDF of that on our website as well. So we'll send those links to you after. There's a follow-up email that will go out. So I don't think it'll be too much of an issue not having it, because it really is a live demo here today. And okay, so just the overview. QMAP, when we talk about that, means Quality Mentoring Assessment Path. This is a self-assessment tool for mentoring programs, and it's really designed to help our programs improve their current processes by evaluating program quality. So that's that statement, and kind of what does that mean, or where does that program quality come in? Like, how are we determining that? And I think the difference between, going through the Mentoring Partnership of Minnesota's QMAP and sort of doing the Elements of Effective Practice checklist is that the Elements of Effective Practice for mentoring is definitely a foundation and something that we reference heavily and are looking at. But we're also, because the QMAP was developed with a whole committee of mentoring professionals from throughout the state of Minnesota, also looking at other research or other evidence-based practice, and really this third piece of looking at insight from those mentoring program practitioners. So, maybe there isn't research about it yet, but if programs can provide evidence that it works for their program, or if it's something that we have a sense from just practice that this is something that everybody should be doing, or that people should be aware of, then we might have included a little more detail than the Elements of Effective Practice. Questions about the QMAP and what it is? Does anybody have, before I keep going, any other pieces about the overview? Or about the elements. This is just a little comparison that I wanted to show, and that if you look on the, I have to do my little highlighter thing, or spotlight. If you look on the Elements of Effective Practice, that's in these 4 sections of program design, program management, operations, and evaluation. The QMAP is really, there's 3 sections. There's a 4th section, which is the uploads, but if we talk about the content, really the program design and management pieces we have them wrapped up into the whole program management section. That's because the QMAP really isn't designed for a program that's not up and running yet. So, we do want you to think about a mission statement and how will you staff your program and some of those design elements. But really, if you are somebody who is completing this online self-assessment tool, it probably means that your program's in action and you already have matches going and that sort of thing. So just to combine those together. And I think some of if I remember, some of the program design elements, some of those things fall under evaluation as well. So we just work them into those 3 sections. So in the program operations piece, which we're going to focus on today, so program management's the same, there's program evaluation. The items within each one of these sections are slightly different, but if we look at the program operations and compare, they're pretty close. I mean, the different items that are within each section are similar, but some of the evidence or some of the pieces that we ask for between the elements and the QMAP are a little bit different, and that's what we'll see even more of. Finally, just so you know, the status and sort of where we're at with the QMAP is that we have a usability pilot underway. And so the ladies I'm going to introduce next are both a part of this usability pilot, where it's, let's have 10 programs who have been involved with helping to create this, just run through the actual online tool and see how it's working. Do all the links work? Is all the navigation working? And, are there things that we could tweak there? We also have recruitment underway for 2 pilot projects that are set to take place in the next couple of months. So, so those will be another piece of really vetting it and finding out if this really works and gets at what we're trying to do. So just to emphasize again, what you're seeing here, this is a sort of a sneak peek, and it's not a final product. So your feedback, even during these webinars, is really important. And there are no scores or ratings, and I put the smiley face in the yet there, and that's something that programs are really interested in, is at some point when we gather enough information or enough programs have gone through the QMAP, then maybe we can establish some benchmarks for different types of programs. Sort of what's an average score for a school-based program, or what's an average score for a community-based program, but we don't have any sort of scoring mechanism or anything at this point yet. It's really about a self-assessment of quality and having MPM there to, once you're done and you've completed the assessment, we're designing and figuring out, what's the review process then? Like, what do you get back from us, and knowing that we're going to design our training and technical assistance to respond to the needs identified in the QMAP. All right. So I'm trying to keep that brief, but really if there are questions or things that are unclear about how the QMAP works, just feel free to throw those in. But I think once we start looking at the tool, it'll make even more sense as to kind of what this is. But we have to introduce these 2, our test pilots, as I'm calling them. We have as panelists today Rebecca, or Becky Pilarczyk, and she has this awesome new title of Director of Quality Control for Boulder Options. And I think when we get to the next slide, Becky, I might have you just say a little bit more about what type of program you have.
No, it's good. I'm sorry, I am having problems getting to the actual slide, so I've been working on it this whole time.
Okay.
My apologies.
And then we have Linda with Northfield Public Schools, and she's the coordinator of the Connected Kids program there. So we have a community-based, so Boulder Options is a one-to-one match of a community-based program, and then we have a school-based program that's embedded within that school system, so we can see a little bit of how people would respond with different types of programs, because the QMAP does send you on a different path if you are an embedded program or an independent standalone program. So we have 2 different people here to help walk us through this. The first thing that people need to do, and this is something that we have on this slide here, but I'm also going to show you, is in order to get to the QMAP, you need to register your program. So a lot of our Minnesota programs have already gone through this process and registered their programs, and then they're approved and receive a username and a password. And so what I've done is I have a sort of a made-up program that I went through the program registration process. I got my username and password, and so what I'll do is show you kind of what that looks like and how you go and you log in, and then how you get access to the to the QMAP. So I just have to switch programs here. Here we go. Okay. So I have to get my here's my spotlight again. So what I'm going to do is log out, I think. It won't let me go back. Here we go. So if I log out, if you go to our website, so www.mpmn.org, you see there's this program login section. So I can log in, I'm going to scroll down here. So I have a...
Where is the program lock? And that's the thing that's not working for me, April, is the fact that I'm on a foreign computer. And
Okay.
yesterday when I went, there was an actual program login I could click on, and there's nothing here. I'm not sure what that is. I'm sorry to complicate things.
I'm not sure. Becky, I wouldn't worry about it too much right now,
Okay.
maybe,
Okay.
and we'll just, we can just look at this one then too, okay?
Okay.
Sorry, participants, if that doesn't make sense, but it's sort of just a technical piece with the webinar. But so I log in, and let's just say, so when I did the registration process, I would have entered all of this information about my program. This stuff isn't public to anyone. This would just be if I'm logging in with my unique username and password, then I can see what information I submitted for my program. So then I just click over here to the quality mentoring assessment path, and I'm going to make this bigger. Okay, so you can see that now. So here we are on the QMAP. There is a piece about the confidentiality and the privacy policies here that you read first, and then we can, down here is where this helps determine which direction you're going with the QMAP. So are you a standalone or non-standalone? So our embedded program. So for the program that I made up, it's an independent standalone youth mentoring organization. And then I can go next. Now, the first section is our program management. That's not what we're going to look in detail at today, but you can kind of get a sense of what that looks like. What I am going to do is I can jump ahead to section 2, which is where we're going to start. And I know that's where Linda and Becky have looked at these and to see what this might look like. Since I selected an independent standalone organization, then Becky, we can always change my answers to what you might have wanted to do, and then we can always show Linda's too if it's different than that. Okay, so what I want to do at this time with everybody is just, I'm going to walk through some of these questions, and what we can also do is compare them then to what the elements of effective practice. Oop, application is paused, okay. Okay, so we can compare them to what the new elements of effective practice are asking for as well. So the first item in our program operations and section I here is just develop a plan for recruiting mentors. And then there are 3 items within here, within this letter I, within the items I. So develop a plan for recruiting mentors. So just defining eligibility requirements for mentors. Linda and Becky, was that clear for you, or how would you have answered that for your programs?
Well, I would have, and this is Linda, so I would have, and I think I did, marked it number 5 because we are doing it. Well, that is completed, that we have completed in regular practice.
Okay. So what we could do is say that if you hadn't done that, you might select the second one, and then you just you would fill in sort of what actions are you interested in taking to complete this or improve it. But since Linda selected this as completed or in regular practice, that they define the eligibility requirements for mentors, and then you're ranking yourself on this 5-point scale. Becky or Linda, any comments on the scale itself or rating the quality?
Well, and we talked a little bit about this. I guess when I went through this, my thought is that as I was looking at the ratings, number 5 is a perfect program. And what we're hoping to do is have a better program. A lot of my scoring is probably a number 4 or a number 3. I mean, we're in between 3 and 4 because I think to rate ourselves as 5 on many things, I'm really looking about where we can improve. And while I will show some 5 ratings on some things, those are things that are pretty concrete and don't change very much. but we're always evolving, and so I find it really hard to rate me a 5 on many things, personally. But I think they make sense, but it makes you think.
Sure.
And so that's a good thing.
Yeah, and we spent a lot of time on, the scale and how can we make it shorter and should we make it a bullet point. I don't know, Becky, if you have any thoughts on the scale too.
I like it. I think it captures what we're trying to do. I think we probably were a little, we consistently rated a 5, but that's because we just did your webinar on elements of effective practice and really decided to compare ourselves to that 3rd edition. And so we've created new positions, we've restructured our organization, all to be sure that we can try and stay ahead of the mentoring field and be really intentional and utilize best practices. Because I think we have our model, but then we just constantly tweak based on that. If that makes sense.
And obviously we're not going to go through the scale for each one of the items, but just so we can, get familiar with what this says. I mean, if you rated yourself as, this is completed or in regular practice, and you go to rate yourself and you rated yourself a 1, it just means like, performed without intentionality or any awareness of best practice. Sort of, we're just doing it, and we have no documentation. There's no policy about it. It's just something we're doing. It might be rating it a 1 because it's something that you're doing and you feel like having eligibility requirements for mentors is happening, but but it creates a negative reputation. It might be that within your community, mentors are turned off by some of the requirements that you have, or sometimes people might rate it a 1 because there could be something that we're listing here as a best practice, but this piece about reducing effective use of program resources and capacity, it might be that, yeah, we're doing this, but we think it's a big waste of time. Or then this last piece about we're doing it, but we don't know who's supposed to do it. It's not done consistently, but it is something that we're doing. Then there's sort of the in-between phase. There's number 3 where it's sort of, there's some awareness of this best practices. There might be some documentation, but it's not accessible by everyone, and it's performed regularly but not consistently. And then like Linda said, sort of this in between there and here where there's some room for improvement, or number 5 that like, yeah, we've got this nailed and we know exactly why we're doing this practice. It's done intentionally. We have it well documented. Everyone understands it, from our board to our staff to our volunteers. It's something that we think really helps us do our work better, really clearly defined. So, when you first start doing the QMAP, if any of you end up doing it, I mean, the first, I don't know, what would you guys say, dozen questions or so, you might find yourself really reading through the scale. But this scale is the same for each one of the items, so you kind of get familiar with what number 1 means, what number 3 means, and what number 5 means, or those in-between ratings, to be able to work through that. But we spent a lot of time with the committee defining each item, each one of those scale items, sort of what does it really mean, and what do we want to find out from programs. Because what we really want to find out too as the mentoring partnership is, are there programs that are doing these practices, or are there best practices that programs are consistently rating as a 1? Like, yeah, we're doing this, but we don't really understand why. Or we're doing this, but it's a real pain to have to do it. So thinking about how we can identify those things and either raise awareness or help people understand what it is, or think about, does this best practice, is it really a best practice? Okay, let's move.
And April, I can honestly say that 7 years ago when I first started at my job, I would not have answered the questions anywhere near the way I did, because we were a 3-month mentoring program, and we were just so different. So yeah, I think it really does help you evolve and grow.
Great. So the other pieces here were just recruit eligible mentors using diverse recruitment strategies. That's a key there, and also about realistically portraying the benefits, practices, and challenges of mentoring. the way I answered this one for my made-up program is that it's not relevant to the program. I based it on a program that I used to have that we had one recruitment strategy. It was a cross-age mentoring program, so it was high school students, and it was really kind of competitive for mentors to get in, so we had one informational meeting and they applied, and we got enough mentors to do it. So so that would be sort of, with a program like that, you might have some questions about, well, I don't know if this is relevant or not about the diverse piece, but realistically portraying the benefits, practices, and challenges, yes. And then the next one is regularly review and refine your mentor recruitment plan, strategies, and goals. I'm going to pop up the elements of effective practice, but Linda and Becky, if you have any thoughts about the other two questions within this section.
And again, am I on? Yeah. Part of it may be it's every individual looks at the questions differently, but when I look at the second one about recruit eligible mentors, we've got different recruitment strategies, but we struggle in an area, let's say, to recruit mentors of color. And so I ranked us as a 4, knowing that made me put in an action plan to see what we can do and be more intentional about doing that.
So you would add an action plan kind of in here about this is what we're going to do, and
right.
And
it's not something. It's the thing I struggle with the rating system some on is these are all things we're doing, and we know their best practices, but we can always do it better, or just to keep in. I guess what I hope to use it for is to keep in front of me the things that we really need to keep in the forefront.
Great.
And I think I focus on the words on intention and best practices and the like throughout these questions, and that I keep saying it, but that we do pull out the elements of effective practice and the research and evidence-based copy that's recently come out, and we do try and adapt our program to that. Just recently, we did one of the enhancements they suggested, which is to do specialized training on specialized populations, like foster care youth and children or prisoners and whatnot. And we actually implemented, an additional 2-hour training for them based on the different special populations. So I feel like we're doing it, and that we have our finger on constantly trying to improve, just as Linda was saying as well.
Good. So this is just, I was showing what Becky was talking about in the enhancements, but I'm going to go back up here. So this is how the elements of effective practice, the 3rd edition, is set up. And I know we looked at this in a previous research and action webinar, but so you look at the benchmarks. I have to keep pulling up my little spotlight. The benchmarks for mentor recruitment, and they really have one that engaging in recruitment strategies and really emphasizing that realistically portray the benefits, practices, and challenges of mentoring in the program. Because that's the piece that's research-based, and there's not a whole lot of research, but they're looking at Renee Spencer's work and talking about how mentors are more likely to, that there's more mentor retention and longer relationships if the program has realistically portrayed those the benefits or the challenges of mentoring in the program, so that mentors are really prepared from the very beginning, from recruitment, for what they're getting themselves into. But in the enhancements, is where it says there's a written statement outlining those eligibility requirements, which is something that we have included in the QMAP as just one of the items. And thinking about the QMAP again as this educational tool. So if this is an enhancement, Mentor has it as an enhancement because there's no research that that they're not citing research-based standards here. It's just an enhancement that they think it's one of those practice-based pieces that that you should have a job description, or you should have something written and documented about what makes mentors eligible for your program. So then, if we look back to the QMAP, to our tool, this 3rd piece, I3, about regularly reviewing and refining mentor recruitment plan strategies and goals, is something that our committee thought would be really important, and really in looking through all the different pieces about, we do this with our fundraising plans, we do this with a lot of different pieces, but let's, maybe an extra standard would be, okay, so you are doing, X, Y, and Z recruitment strategies. How often are you tracking the success of those, or how often are you going back and really looking at what is my mentor recruitment plan, and do I keep doing the same things over and over again and getting the same results, or are there other things that I should be trying? Or if I try something new, am I actually tracking to see if it really, if it's really working or enhancing our program? Other thoughts about that piece? Anything? Did this one make sense, the review and refine your recruitment plan for Linda and Becky?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's right on.
All right. So then, the counterpart to this piece and the way we have it broken up, because we thought it would be really interesting and important for the QMAP to be gathering information about what we're doing for mentees. And that's also something, if you look at the elements of effective practice, that they're looking at mentee recruitment as well. So within this standard one about recruitment, we're looking at that we need to have things in place about mentee eligibility as well. So we have this developing a plan for recruiting mentees. So again, we're talking about eligibility requirements for mentees, but this is with an emphasis on youth whose needs best match the services offered by the program. Sort of, are you recruiting the right kids? Do you have the right kids for your program? Do you know who your program best serves? Because we know there are lots and lots of different mentoring programs out there. In Minnesota, we talk about having 400 to 500 programs here in the States, and was just at a networking meeting recently where people were really emphasizing that they're not competitors, that they really, all of our programs serve, are best matched to different types of kids or different populations of kids and different ages, and thinking about your eligibility requirements for mentees. How, for Becky and for Linda, how did you respond to this one?
And April, I don't know if you have my screen up, or
yeah, I can.
I'm seeing my screen. So, well,
yeah,
I'm seeing my screen.
This is mine, and we can.
Okay, because I'm not seeing yours, but
okay.
for the first part, for the first question, our grant has we have a new grant now, so it's expanded, and so we've expanded the criteria for the youth that we've served. So, I could make a note that I want to make sure all of our referral sources have that info. Mm-hmm. Where I had the questions on this one, I had a couple questions about, because it talks about recruiting eligible mentees. Mm-hmm. And we don't directly recruit mentees, we work on a referral system. So are those two words interchangeable? If that makes sense.
This is Becky, and
yep, go ahead.
I think it's finding your niche is something that we continue to struggle with a little bit, in that we also are a referral system, but we don't necessarily recruit, but we've built strategic relationships with partners to get the population that we're interested in serving. And so I would put us more at a 4 on the second part of that question, just because of the fact that we're still trying to figure out what percentage should be prevention and what should be intervention. But we do strategically, create relationships with schools who work with truant and youth who are struggling academically, and with county workers and social workers who work with probation and youth who have committed a first offense. So that was how I interpreted it, because I understand it's referral, but I think based on funding streams and just kind of your niche, you tend to try to form those strategic partnerships.
I think that's a good question about that word, because I think it's intended to encompass, how do you get your mentees? Because with the committee, and do you have a plan? Well, what's your plan for getting your mentees? Because within our committee, we talked about how there are, I know of programs that did a great job with planning their mentor recruitment, but then hadn't really thought through how they would get those mentee referrals or how they would get the mentees involved in the program. But there needs to be a process for that too. You know, and knowing that we're dealing with an entire range of programs who would be coming to use this tool, that there may be some that have it, you know, like Becky, there's a director of quality control, or others that are just a small, small one-person operation, and you know, thinking about, do we have this documented? Who are our mentees? Who is our target population, and how do we make sure that we have a plan in place? For some people, this might be really easy and be, you know, we get our referrals from X, Y, and Z, and this is where they come from, and this is the process for getting them involved in the program. But for others, it might be, you know, a little unclear, and that's where the educational element of this tool comes in to be, as you're working through it. Again, it's a self-assessment. You're doing it yourself with the help. This is a good time to show over here that you can click on resources here, and you can click this help button, which I have to turn off my spotlight in order to do that. But you can click help and ask those questions. So, you know, like as Linda was going through, she was like, well, recruit, what does that really mean? You can click here and give us a call or email. There's also, if you needed to come up with that plan for recruiting mentees, then you can go to this resources page, and we've got, you know, this whole list. You can go to the elements of effective practice. There are some other policy and procedure pieces, you know, and other resources that we have available for you to look at.
Well, and I think this question reiterates the fact that this QMAP process isn't to punish anyone, but actually to benefit people, because it really kind of helps you figure out where you are and what your specialty is. I mean, are you good in elementary kids, all kids, you know, high school kids? I think each question really helps an agency examine itself and start adopting best practices. So.
And I would agree completely with Becky. It's a really good process.
And that is the recruitment section. So what I'm going to bump ahead here. So with recruitment, back to just the slideshow, just to summarize that, you know, in the elements of effective practice, you know, the standard is that you recruit appropriate mentors and mentees. You know, that it's important to realistically describe the program's aims and expected outcomes. Within the QMAP, we've got 3 items for each. I mean, there's a lot of similarity here between the QMAP and the elements of effective practice. However, the QMAP includes the enhancements from the elements of effective practice, and also added that one item about, are you reviewing and refining that recruitment plan on a regular basis. Okay. I'm going to go, oops, wrong one. Okay. So when we go ahead, conveniently, the next section is about screening. So there are quite a few more items in this section. Let's see here. I'm just going to, did we have any questions about the recruitment section or comments from other attendees before we go here? We will have a chance to ask more questions on later too. I just realized I haven't been, just want to ask before we move on. Or is that all, maybe it's all pretty clear. All right, so screening, we'll move on here. So the first section, we've got screen potential mentors. And we're talking about screening in a holistic manner. This is not just about background checks, as you'll see. So I'm just going to kind of scroll down here and highlight them. But we have the, you know, they usually have some written policies for consistent screening processes. So what are your criteria for accepting and rejecting potential mentors? And that was something in our committee that we came back to over and over again, that you know, a lot of programs might have the background check process in place but aren't sure what to do with that check when it comes back. Like, what if something does pop up on the background check? You know, what is your criteria for accepting and rejecting? Or are there other criteria, other things, you know, if you're doing a reference check or an interview, what are you looking for? So making sure that you have that criteria in place so that you're doing this in a fair way. I'm just going to run through these real quick, but communicate with mentors about expectations. So again, we're talking about what's the minimum, we're talking about the minimum commitment. and what's the weekly commitment, all those different pieces about making sure mentors are clear about that. Kind of a reiteration of recruitment about being clear and realistic about what they're getting themselves into. We've got written applications. We have at least one reference check, so there are a lot of programs that might do more than that. They might do personal and professional, or might have more stringent standards for that. Again, this is sort of thinking about, in cases of program that's not doing reference checks at all, to think about how do we use this tool to help programs understand and learn and become more aware of how much more holistic their screening process could be. Perform at least one criminal background check on potential mentors. This could be local, state, and or federal. We include this, and again in the resources section you can see we provide the link to the elements of effective practice, and we want people to be aware of what the national standards are, but we know from our programs that requiring state and federal, or requiring a fingerprint check at this point without the resources to support these programs, financial resources, is unrealistic, or would be unrealistic for programs. So a part of it is for us gathering that information and finding out more about that, and using our position to hopefully generate and help make it easier for all programs to do that. Checking sex offender and child abuse registries for potential mentors. It's something that we included separately. Sometimes these get lumped together, but included separately because there's no cost involved with checking those. And a face-to-face interview, interviews with potential mentors. This piece about supporting additional screening processes relevant to the program. So driver records for those who do transport mentees. Some programs do home visits for if their mentees are going to be spending time in the mentor's home. Again, you can always check this is not relevant to my program or organization, or it's really just about what else could you do to screen your mentors. So in my made-up program where we have high school students as mentors, what are some other screening things that we could do, or maybe checking Facebook pages or something like that, or doing a Google search or things like that. And then finally, the understanding and following ethical, professional, and legal standards related to background checks and screening. So do you know what volunteer rights are in your state, or are you being respectful of confidentiality? Do you have policies in place to make sure that whatever information comes back from those background checks and from your screening process is kept between the mentor and your program? That's a lot. So there's 9 items here. Linda and Becky, any thoughts as you went through this, or was this pretty clear?
For me it was, simply because we are embedded in a school district. Mm-hmm. There's some pretty black and white requirements for background checks. And so we rated, I rated us very highly on all of those. The piece that did come out to me is with this new grant, we are just in the recent past, been seeing some mentees go to mentors' homes. So that served as a kind of a light bulb to say, okay, this is something we need to do this.
Right. That's exactly, yeah, that's great to hear.
They're very clear in your different buttons. I guess the other things we can click on for the resources are really helpful if you do have any question or confusion. But we don't allow one of the ways we kind of avoid some of it and didn't necessarily rate ourselves high on all the questions because we didn't apply to everything, was the fact that we don't allow the youth in the mentors' homes during our program. So we don't go that far, and it's really just to release us from reliability because we don't do mentor home checks, but we do extensive background checking.
What I think is going to be so great for the mentoring partnership from our perspective too is how much more we're going to learn about the programs that we work with. We know a lot of things anecdotally, or we might, we kind of know things, but to have completed self-assessments and just to have those tidbits of information about this is how we do it, or to find out what are people doing to screen their mentors, and because there's so much variation, and then to be able to come up with what are the, what are the minimum pieces.
April, will people
Yeah.
be able to get access to each other's profiles in case, and I'm just throwing this a random example out there, but if we decided, okay, the kids can go to the mentors' homes, what are other people doing or saying for that? But
I think that's when you could contact us, and then we could certainly ask
Sure.
if there's a similar type program. That's what I think is going to be so great, is to think, is there a similar program? One of the things that the committee has talked about too, but this is not something that has been decided or to think about, but one of the things that committee members have mentioned is, and this, Becky, is that they'd be willing to be kind of peer mentors or to review the quality, somebody's completed application, and to have another program talk with you too, like walk through the program and walk through your self-assessment and share, this is what we do here, take it or leave it as an idea, or if this is an area that you've identified that you'd like to strengthen, let's find a program that does this really well, a program that's similar to yours, and you guys can network and share that information that way. They won't be just public though. That would have to be arranged. So it's a no public profile with your QMAP results yet. It might be something that programs can opt for in the future. So just to look at the elements of effective practice here, again, pretty similar. Mentors completing an application, talking about that minimum commitment. This is, again, about the minimum commitment. We kind of combined this B2 and B3 about what is the commitment for the calendar year and what's the commitment for how often there's the frequency and duration of those meetings. At least one face-to-face interview, conducts a reference check, conducts a criminal background check, and the national standard then will include a national criminal records database. So along with, so they've got that spelled out a little bit more. And what's nice is that we want to link to that so that people can have the opportunity to do the QMAP, but also be aware of these are the national standards. So I think a lot of programs will probably try to meet this level if possible, if they're able to do so. Enhancements would be, for mentor, including that you do a national fingerprint-based FBI criminal background check. And for school-based programs, to have something in place about the close of the school year and what about maintaining contact in the summer. I think we have something similar to that, but more in the closure section about sort of managing your risk and things that you need to be aware of with closure. So we don't have that necessarily in the screening process, but more later on when you're trying to decide how to maintain contact or what level of involvement you have for mentors and mentees looking at maintaining contact.
April, I have only looked at the short section of the elements of effective practice, and I'm guessing some of the other people here on this phone call have only seen that too. Do you know what the rationale, well, I don't know how to actually ask this question, but the point is, I think the most difficult thing for our agency would be to adopt fingerprint-based background checks, because it is an additional expense based on all the national checks that you do, and you have to send someone, who's willing to drive to a place to get fingerprinted and whatnot. That if there's other alternatives to it, or just what the rationale was behind that, because I haven't read the full elements of effective practice, just kind of the summary.
This is one that isn't incredibly, this is one of those that's really practice-based.
Okay.
And, it's not like there's research on the pieces about screening for their commitment and those pieces, but the background checks and the safety piece is more about that risk management. And they do have some findings from the safety net program. So the mentor has safety net, which can provide those FBI checks at a lower rate. So they've got funding to do that, but there's a waiting list to be a part of safety net and certain requirements in order to get into that. But they do know that if they do the federal check that I think it was 6% of those background checks showed up with an offense on there that would eliminate that person from being a mentor. Some things, for example, in Oregon, they do trainings for programs on how to collect your own fingerprint so that you can submit them so that you're not sending your volunteers off to another place to do that, or they'll give out, have secured fingerprinting kits. It's not something that we're necessarily doing yet. I'm not sure if that's in the scope of what we're doing, but thinking about, with the support of mentor or thinking about if there was more access to safety nets for those reduced cost background checks, that maybe that would be a training that the BCA could do for programs. Yeah, but it's a big expense. It's, a federal fingerprint background check would be $29 per mentor, about $30 here. So if you're doing that in addition to other checks, then too it becomes a really expensive and time-consuming process. Any other thoughts? I don't know, Polly, do you have any thoughts about that? I didn't want to misspeak.
Polly, no, we actually have been in contact with both Mentor and a local program that's interested in getting the fingerprint training, and we're kind of on hold with that at this point. So we're looking at a couple options around that, but I would say we're not ready to commit to either doing the training or having the fingerprinting access here. We're going to look at some of the options and see if that's something that programs are interested in.
Mm-hmm. And I do use Safety Net, and primarily because we have federal grants, and so it was part of the federal grant application. And we've gotten the police department to provide the service in kind. Not everybody could do that, but they're partners with us, so they provide the service in kind, so we pay the $18 Safety Net fee.
Right. And one of the, I didn't say this, but for those, in case you're wondering about this, but that to do the fingerprint background check, the difference there is that if you're doing a national and not just a state registry, it's really the idea that criminals would move, or people will move, and if you're only doing a state background check, you're only going to get offenses that occurred in that state, at least for Minnesota. And then if you did the national, then you could see anything that pops up for that person in any state. Some programs get around it and they ask for, what are other previous states that you've lived in, and they can see if they have a free check there, and there's other ways of doing that. Part of it with the background check too that I always tell programs in elements of effective practice training is that, it's really a safeguard for your program. It's one of those things that, the more frequent the risk to young people is that mentors will quit, or mentors will back out, or matches won't last. But if something horrible did happen, or there was a mentor who had something in their background and you didn't do the background check and something did happen where it harmed that young person, then it could really, that could just destroy your program. So it's really about your risk management pieces, and how do you, this really ties into your program sustainability as well. So, and thinking about what is the justification for some of these things, because there might be programs that respond with, I don't get it, why would we do background checks on our mentors? We know these people, we don't think that it's necessary. And so some of that is just awareness building. And what we'll learn from, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to just kind of chime in before we left this topic. I just last week ran into a just sort of interesting overview on this topic on the website Blue Avocado, if people know that. It's sort of a kind of funky nonprofit management site, but it's www.blueavocado.org. And they have an Ask the HR person, and they have a nice overview on criminal records checks from prospective staff and volunteers. It was from September 29th, 2009. I just thought it provided kind of a good sense of pros and cons, as well as using commercial services. So I'm going to start kind of incorporating this into some of the things I do when I talk to folks, but if people want to access it right now, it's on the website, and we'll include that link when we do the follow-up email.
Great, that's what I was just going to say. Great. Okay, so let's just take a peek at the, we'll jump ahead to the mentee screening because we do include screen potential mentees in the QMAP. So it's something that, you know, it'd be interesting to hear if you thought about it that way before for Becky and Linda. But we've got a piece here about having those written policies for, you know, what are your criteria for accepting and rejecting potential mentees? So again, kind of tied in with your recruitment piece, you know, who is it that you're surveying, and is there something about a young person that might make them unacceptable for your program? This L2 about developing and administering applications and enrollment forms, the important piece here, including informed consent from parents and guardians. So you want to make sure you have all of the enrollment information and permission from parents and guardians. There might be some schools that maybe don't do that. Be interested to hear about that. That was one of the discussions that came up, that, you know, that if they had to get informed consent from parents and guardians, they would never be able to do their program. That was a discussion at in Portland at the Summer Institute for Youth Mentoring when we were looking at the elements of effective practice. And communicating with youth and families about the expectations for the program. So as part of your screening, making sure they understand what the commitment is to the match. You know, how long are they expected to be in this relationship? How frequently are they supposed to meet with their mentor? How long should those meetings be, and making sure both the young person and their family or guardian or whoever is involved in that decision. Linda or Becky, did this screening potential mentees, was that a new way to think about it, or something that just expected?
Let's see. For me, I think, you know, we have criteria set up for those who refer kids to us about who our priorities are. And I think I made a note on mine. The only thing I would the only time we would probably reject a kid is if he didn't want to do it or his parents wouldn't sign off on it. Mm-hmm. But it helps us think about it in terms of prioritizing kids and who gets matched first, sort of thing, on that piece, on that particular question, is kind of how I looked at it. If kids want a mentor, if there's any way we could match them, we will, but we really work with a priority system. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that there's any, we would strongly, well, we would be really honest with with probably sources of referral about kids that are really difficult to match. Not that we wouldn't match them if we got the right mentor, but they may take longer to match. So that's kind of the way I looked at that question.
Okay.
In terms of rejecting.
Yeah.
And I concur. It's about the criteria, and it's about the specialty or the niche that we were talking about beforehand. And yes, it's either youth or parent rejection that, as for the most part, will preclude a youth who is within our criteria to not do our program. Would be that, you know, either the youth said they don't want to mentor, don't want to participate in our program components, or the parent did, for the most part.
Yeah, and I think I was just looking at something where, you know, somebody had spelled out, you know, some of the criteria for rejecting potential participants, and this was in working with system-involved youth, was that, you know, that they were convicted of a homicide, or, you know, there might be some level of adjudication that this program was not, you know, that those participants were not somebody that they were going to try to match with a mentor in their, you know, that wasn't in the scope of their program. So, you know, those might be some of the policies that you might have. And some of this might just be that you have a policy and we serve, you know, 8 to 10-year-olds. If you're 11 or 7, then you know, you don't fit, you know, so we'll have to wait, or things like that. So that part of that for some programs is just, how do I manage my waiting list? Yeah. You know, if I take everybody, then we can't do that. But if we can do some of those things. So some of it, you know, as you can see, is up to interpretation, you know, and again, that you can click for help, and you can contact the mentoring partnership as well for that assistance. For the elements of effective practice angle on it, it's pretty similar that there's an application and informed consent, that they agree to that minimum commitment, and how, again, that frequency and duration piece. So our mentee screening includes, a little bit more than what the elements has there. We're talking about having this, we just broke it down a little bit differently than how the elements is there, but in a way that made sense to our to the committee. So the final piece really, so just knowing that this happens for all of the sections, but if you, in this introductory, in the section, there's a point at the end where we upload some documents, which this is really towards the end, and even me coming back and looking at this and realizing that it's a little unclear, but some of the things that we would ask from programs to show evidence would be, give us in writing, what is the eligibility for your mentors and mentees? Do you have a written recruitment plan? You said you did, so let's see it. And then there's just will be a checklist to show us what you're doing to screen mentors, and again, that's to screen mentors and mentees, to show us then and to be able to collect that information, for you to think about and reflect, what is it that we're doing, what is it that we might want to start doing, but also what is it that the mentoring partnership can learn about the field in Minnesota and what it is that programs are doing in these areas. And I uploaded a different document here just to show what it would look like when they're all uploaded, and as I'm testing the tool myself for usability, just to see how that works. And I think for those of you doing usability, and for Becky and Linda, I think there's some more instruction that needs to happen on this particular section and on this page about what to upload and how to save them and that sort of thing.
Well, and a question I have, because of course I haven't gotten that far yet, is there a way to print off those documents? I mean, is there a way to print off that particular page so that we know what kind of documents we need to upload?
Yeah, I
Does that
think
make
if
any
you go to
sense?
this page, you could print this page.
Okay, because when I tried to print it before, I did not get that last page.
Oh.
I just got all the grids.
Oh, you printed the PDF of.
I printed the PDF of the QMAP.
Got it.
So
I bet we could add the
page.
documents list into that PDF. I bet that's a really good question.
It'd just be really helpful, I think.
Great. We'll make a note of that. That's some great feedback. All right, so where am I at here? Oops. Sorry. We get to look at you guys again.
Oh, I told you that's a 10-second slide.
Oh, what's going on here? All right, here, we're back to where I was. Okay, so recruitment, we have the screening. We showed a little bit about what's similar, what's different. And the last thing that we wanted to show everyone was how you can participate. So again, if you go and register your program and log in, you won't see the QMAP as an option yet. Right now, when in the pilot phase, it's not open to everybody, so it's you can't really see that. But if you wanted to get an early start on it and be a part of one of the upcoming pilots, you're invited to do that. Just know that there are some criteria for participating in the pilot. For many of you from out of state, you have to be a Minnesota program. And we'd like for the pilot for you to be in operation for at least 2 years and actively working with at least 20 matches. We just want to get a sense of sort of an established program, or about nothing a lot smaller, just so you have a good sense of whether this tool is going to work for the programs that it's really designed for. And you have to be oops, I should have changed this slide, an adult with youth mentoring program. We have to have adults mentoring young people. So for the pilot, we're not looking at cross-age mentoring programs, and the mentoring partnership really doesn't, our expertise is not in adult-to-adult mentoring. So it's really what I like to say, adult with youth mentoring programs. And to participate in the pilot, if you're interested, you should contact Polly. Polly wrote, she was just on speaking to us to indicate that interest, and and she can help you navigate that process. So if you're approved for the pilot, then you'll get special access to that QMAP section. And once we're ready for official rollout, then any program that's registered would have that option. It'll pop up when they log in, and you'll be able to see that you can register. I know that we're a little over time. Just want to see if there are any other questions or thoughts. Feel free to, contact us individually too. I know some of you, particularly from other states or even, potential participants here in state, have already contacted us, and we're really just looking forward to seeing the tool a little bit more. Here's Polly's information again. Oops. And we will do another, probably the training section. We'll dig in a little bit further next month into another section of the tool and be looking at, what are the requirements here, and what is it that we're looking for. And for Becky and Linda, thank you so much for going through it and taking a peek at it ahead of time and being able to share some of your experience with it. And hopefully we can flip over and have even more time to look at your screens and find out even more about how that is working for you. But it sounds like from both of you that you're already finding it useful. And if there's anything else you want to add for people about that, you can do that now.
I just think it's a really beneficial tool to examine your program against and try and make it stronger. So it's been enjoyable.
Yep. And I would agree. I think you can really learn from it, and you can learn what you need to do better, or at least be validated in that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, that's a great point. The validation is fantastic, and thank you so much. I realize I'm a little rusty on I feel like on my speaking, just having had 3 months off. So it's great to be back. It's great to be doing these webinars and great to have you all participating. I know that we'll have even more attendees in the future. Apologize for going a little bit over, and I think if there aren't any questions, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you so much. Hope to see you next month.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks, April.
Thank you.
Becky, are you still on?
I am, yeah.
This is Linda. I had that problem. You can't find the program login
I can't.
on your screen.
And I'm wondering if it's because it's pulled up on my other computer at work, because I'm from home now. I don't know.
Well,